All right, time to get you our latest business headlines. I'm joined in the studio by Catherine Bennett. Hello to you, Catherine. The UK Finance Ministry then announcing earlier this evening that Britain has reached a post-Brexit agreement with the EU on financial services. What does that entail?
Well, details are quite thin on the ground at the moment, especially as the deal hasn't actually even been signed yet.
Sure.
But officials have said that it creates a framework for working together. In January, the city in London saw over €6 billion in daily share trading evaporate almost overnight as businesses moved their operations to Amsterdam. So no deal will be able to recoup that loss. But this at least sets a tone of cooperation. It means that both sides will have to meet regularly to share information and discuss future regulation in the sector. Now, it's unlikely, however, that the deal will mention equivalence. That's the important issue of whether London-based firms can operate on the European continent. And that's a difficult subject that will probably have to be hashed out in later talks. Well, let's see what's moving markets at the end of the week. In the EU, stocks closed higher. The FTSE and Frankfurt's DAX were up 1% and the CAC 40 was up over 0.5%. Over on Wall Street, stocks continue their climb after the open, with the Dow Jones and the S&P 500 both up over 0.5%. The Nasdaq has lost some gains, however, dropping just under the flat line. Staying in the US, Amazon is the second largest private employer in the US with more than 800,000 employees, but none of them are unionized. Amazon workers in Alabama are hoping to change that and are voting on whether to form a union. With just days before voting closes, Claire Rush tells us what's at stake.
Union now, union later, union forever.
In Bessemer, Alabama, the fight for economic and racial justice merge as thousands of Amazon employees, many of them black, look to become the first unionized Amazon warehouse in the U.S.
When we say Black Lives Matter, we mean Black lives at work, not just when we're dealing with the criminal justice system. No matter the fact that they are fighting one of the biggest companies in the history of the world, they're still going to keep pressing.
The workers are voting on whether to join the retail, wholesale, and department store union. Among their main grievances, insufficient break time and the intense monitoring of employees during physically demanding shifts that can last up to 12 hours.
Wrists be aching, legs be sore, hands be cramping up. Sometimes my hand get cramped up so bad I just had to use one hand and try to uncramp it. You just aching all over.
Since the start of the pandemic, Amazon workers have come under increasing pressure amid the rise of online shopping. To meet the growing demand, the tech giant hired more than 500,000 people in just the past year. Meanwhile, the company delivered a record performance in 2020. Net profits jumped 84% compared to 2019, and annual revenue increased by 38% to $386 billion. But in spite of this, Amazon has fiercely resisted the union drive in Alabama. It argues that its starting wage of $15 an hour is already more than twice the federal minimum wage, and that union dues would cost workers money. It even created a website called Do It Without Dues. The tech giant concerned that a successful union drive could spark similar actions at its roughly 800 facilities across the country.
Meanwhile, the dispute between China and Western clothes companies rumbles on. China has led a campaign against the brands H&M and Nike after old statements condemning forced labor in Xinjiang resurfaced. Now, H&M has been boycotted by Chinese consumers, has lost partnerships with Chinese celebrities, and has been dropped from major e-commerce platforms in the country. As a result, other brands are now trying to get rid of any statements about China's human rights record. Inditex, the parent company of the fashion brand Zara, did have a statement on its website declaring the company's zero-tolerance policy towards forced labor. Until, that is, it disappeared. The same thing happened with brands Abercrombie & Fitch, VF Corporation, which owns Timberland, and PVH, which owns Calvin Klein. Zara has more stores in China than it does in the United States, and so is obviously keen to avoid losing those much-needed sales right now. Staying in China, the Chinese company NIO is the latest electric vehicle maker to have to suspend production because of a global semiconductor chip shortage. Semiconductors are tiny microchips that are used in almost all electronic devices, and the automobile sector is completely dependent on them. Ford, Honda, General Motors and Volkswagen have also had to cut back production targets. The global chip shortage is because of the pandemic. People staying at home have been playing video games and using electronic devices like never before. So the demand for laptops and consoles has soared. NIO's US-traded shares fell more than 8% after the announcement. That wraps up the business news from me.
All right, Catherine, thank you very much for those business headlines. We'll see you a bit later on in the show.